Good afternoon and welcome to this special Facebook Live event hosted by the Army G1 and the Sergeant Major of the Army, Michael Grinston. Today, the Army G1 Senior Enlisted Advisors and the Sergeant Major of the Army will discuss key changes to the Army Regulation 670-1 and announce significant changes to the Army Grooming Standard. Throughout the event, we're going to take questions from you in the audience, both here in the Pentagon Auditorium and online. So make sure you get those questions into the chat box below, and then here in the room we have a microphone set up. Come stand behind, socially distance, of course, and we'll do that throughout the event as possible. So we'll get to as many of those as we can, but let's go ahead and get started. I'm Sergeant First Class Will Rainier. I'll be co-moderating today's discussion.
And I'm Sergeant First Class Evans. Please help me welcome our panel today. So from Army G1, we have the Policy Branch Sergeant Major Brian Sanders. From Army G1 Sergeant Major, we have Sergeant Major Clark. And gentlemen, please help me welcome Sergeant Major of the Army, SMA Grinston. We'll open the floor for opening remarks from Sergeant Major Grinston.
Change doesn't just happen overnight, so it takes some time. Some people really embrace change, some people don't. So it is a change, so I really look forward to the discussion today. But I really want to thank the hard work of the G1 team. So the G1 put the panel together for the Army. We had soldiers on the panel, so I thank all the panel members. I also want to really thank not just the panel members, but also the soldiers that brought forward those recommendations. So a lot of hard work to get to this point. So they looked at all the recommendations and
I'm going to stop you right here, SMA. It looks like your microphone is not transmitting out. Okay. If we can get that in the booth. We're getting comments that his microphone's not transmitting out on the stream.
Testing. Hello?
Can they hear you, Sergeant?
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
They can hear me. So.
Okay. Step away from the podium. Okay. It's gonna be great. Can you hear me? Somebody type a great. I know you can hear me in the audience. That's what happens, when you're Sergeant Major of the Army. Everybody's got to make jokes. Of course, I can hear you, Sergeant Major. I'm sitting right here. So I'm hoping everyone out in Facebook Live can actually hear me now. We'll kind of work from here and see how this goes. So I really appreciate it. You missed my excitement in the beginning. I'm still excited about all these changes. So we're really excited about the changes that are coming up. And I wanted to thank the G1 team and the soldiers that came to do the panel, the G1, the soldiers that made those recommendations to the panel, made them to us as the senior leaders. We said, hey, put this panel together. Thanks for all those folks that involved this to get us to this point so we can roll these things out. So we looked at the recommendations. The panel made those recommendations to the senior leaders, and we said, yeah, these are great. And that's what we're going to roll out today. So I'm excited about doing this. But I just have to remind everybody, with any good policy, it really boils down to good leaders, too. So once we change the standards, we just got to make sure everybody knows about them. That's where we're giving plenty of time to talk about these things. But without leadership, any policy is not as good as it should be until we actually get the leaders to understand what this policy means. So leadership still matters. We have to have time to say, here's what our standards are. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We have to know it, we have to set it, and then ultimately we'll enforce the standards. And that's what's great about Army. It said, well, this is just what we do. And these aren't about male and female. This is about an Army standard and how we move forward with the Army and being a more diverse, inclusive team. We take recommendations from our soldiers, and then we move forward with those recommendations. So again, I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, SMA Grinston. We have a lot to discuss today, so let's get started. On or about February 26th, the Army will publish the updated AR 670-1. Sergeant Major Clark, what can soldiers expect from this new update?
All right, thank you, Sergeant Evans, for the question. So today at 1600, you will be able to go to the Army Publishing Directorate to download the new AR 670-1 and DAPAM 670-1. But I want to preface my statements before I get into what's going to be in there with there's going to be 30 days before that regulation becomes effective. The purpose behind that is to allow for soldiers and leaders to read through the regulation, provide an understanding, and to make sure that their commands and soldiers are aware of the policy changes that will be made. And then it gives the organization 30 days to get within compliance of the new guidance that will be within the regulation. So some of the big changes that you will see in there, as you know, we are now wearing the Army Green Service uniform. So some guidance that we've been working on since June of 2019 will finally be published for you to be able to read and enforce within your organizations. Another big change that you will see is the soldier sleeve insignia for former wartime service, normally called the combat patch. The name has now changed to the soldier sleeve insignia for military operations in hostile conditions. And one of the big rationales behind that change was for us to allow commanders more flexibility and efficiency in the process for recognizing soldiers who are engaged in combat operations that can be recognized with a combat patch. Some other things that we're also going to add is we created an insignia for the senior enlisted advisor to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So things like that, big ticket items, you will see those items in the publication of the AR 670-1.
Great. And in addition to that, Sergeant Major Clark, we are also authorizing more options for nursing mothers, combined with the temporary promotion policy that we unveiled just a few months ago. Really excited to see these changes for our Army moms. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So what we will now authorize is for soldiers who are breastfeeding to be able to wear a specialized shirt under their Army combat uniform that allows for them to breastfeed. They will also be authorized to remove their Army combat uniform coat, or if they are in ASU's dress mesh uniform or the Army Green Service uniform, they can remove the top in order to breastfeed their children if they need to do so.
Great, thank you. SMA, you mentioned that there was a panel that had convened, and so I want to just learn more about this panel and understand that. So Sergeant Major Sanders, that was kind of one of your main tasks in this entire process. So can you help us just understand what that process looked like, how we developed these recommendations, how they were given to the panel, and just really the entire process so we can understand how all this kind of came to be?
Roger. So I will tell you, initially when the SMA gave me this guidance, I thought it was an impossible task of how to make this significant change for the Army. Like, how do I figure this out? So the SMA, he gave some direction of utilizing our MAGCOM CSMs to get, a lot of, representation, a very diverse representation from throughout our force, that being FORCECOM, TRADOC, USASOC, USAREC, and a myriad of other elements that are out there, as well as grabbing subject matter experts from Walter Reed, Office of the Surgeon General, and even MedCom. So what we were able to do, there were some recommendations that I have been receiving from the field for over the past 6 months to a year. And what I was able to do is provide these recommendations to the panel members that were given to us from these major commands, as well as give to the subject matter experts. And what they were able to do is really explore, deep dive, really look at, how can we get after these and see, make the appropriate modifications if necessary. Really just to sum it up a little bit.
Okay, and then SMA, those recommendations were consolidated and provided to you. Can you speak to what kind of happened after that?
I do want to back up about the panel and how important that was. What we didn't want to do is take recommendations throughout the Army and just give it to, I'd say the more senior folks in the Army and look at it, because we look at it differently. So it was really important for me and for all of us to have people on the panel that were I'm a little over 50, not much, but to have, younger soldiers to say, here's our recommendation. So we had 24-year-olds all the way to 55 on that panel, and that was extremely important. But once the panel made those recommendations, then they brought them. We had the Assistant Secretary of Manpower and Reserves, one of his deputies, Mr. Williams, sat on that chair, and they said, here's the recommendations, here's how the panel voted. And we accepted all the recommendations. I didn't go in and go, nope, don't want that, don't want this. I trusted that the panel had the appropriate information. We brought in the appropriate, experts to explain why these things were important, and we had soldiers on the panel. So when they brought them to us, it was fairly easy for me to go, I trusted that the panel had the right ideas, and then I just accepted what they had taken to me.
If I
Did you
may
want to add
just
something? Sure.
add to what the SMA is saying, just as leading up to this event, I saw a lot of questions on social media about, who's making the decisions for this panel. And just to kind of add to what the SMA was saying, there was representation from operations, operational support, and force sustainment, to even include, females who were in combat arms, MOSs, to really speak to their experiences and how some of these changes will impact their ability to perform their job. But most importantly, some of the points that they were driving home is to feel inclusive with their squad, the individuals that they're serving and training with. And I would tell you, those individuals who were handpicked by their leaders to come in and provide that information was really critical in helping the panel understand the decisions and how important they were going to make. And the SMA mentioned 2-star generals all the way down to sergeants, and they wore civilian clothes so that every person in there didn't have to worry about the rank of the other individual. Every person had an equal voice to voice their concern on each topic that was presented to them.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. So the first change we're going to announce today is the earrings.
SMA,
What do you-
let's hear.
What are
let's
your
hear about it.
thoughts?
Yeah, there we go. It was really another reason, when I keep going back to the panel, another reason is, I'm just going to be honest. If you'd asked me before a panel, I'd said, no, why do we need earrings? We hadn't had them. So, and that's why, I trusted the panel, had a good deliberation, and they brought it and says, hey, we want earrings. And I said, well, I trust the panel. And the panel says this is their recommendation. And they voted, and everybody had an equal vote. We're not going to talk specifically on, how the votes came out. But the majority ruled, and this is one of those things. And our soldiers said, hey, we're going to wear earrings. We wanted to do this. We're not going to do it in combat operations. But if you want to put some earrings on, I think there'll be more guidance to come out. But when we even had the deliberation about how we're going to implement this, is the helmet on or is it off? If the helmet's on, you may take the earrings out. But I think this is really good for our Army. And if you want to wear earrings in a combat uniform, wear the earrings.
Now, I know we're all excited about the earrings. I am especially, but we're not going to move to it yet. We're going to wait till the Alarat come out, right, Sergeant Major Clark and Sergeant Major Sanders?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me just drive that home again.
Somebody out there right now putting in the earrings
in their hand.
Sergeant Alvarez, in my office, she's like, Sergeant Major. So, I think that still applies. Thanks.
Yes, 30 days from now, 670-1 comes into effect, and then an ALARAC will follow after that, authorizing the wear of earrings. So, for whatever reason, let's say the ALARAC gets held up in process, wait for the ALARAC before you decide to don your earrings. That's very key.
Yeah, it's a very important note that the grooming standards are separate from AR 670-1. And so if we could, Sergeant Major Clark, just explain why those two things were separated.
Absolutely. So one, to make sure that we don't cause confusion, as mentioned, we've been working with the changes for 670-1 since June of 2019. And so the process for publishing a regulation, it's a very deliberate process, and it's that way for a reason, but it takes time. So as the regulation is going through that process, decisions are still being made on the wearing appearance of the uniform. And in order to insert any of those decisions in there, we would have to start the process all over for that regulation. So to avoid delaying that regulation any further, we have to wait for it to be published before we can release any additional guidance. If we were to release an ALARAC for grooming standards prior to the regulation coming out, what would happen is once the regulation is published, it would then supersede the ALARAC, and then you would lose your ability to wear your earrings. So we have to be very deliberate and strategic in how we roll the information out to ensure that we don't have basic policy fratricide.
All right, we've got our first question from Facebook. So that didn't take very long. So Sergeant Major Sanders, I'll give this to you. Can you explain the restrictions on the earring first? And then the second one, was there any discussion, is this a gender-neutral standard? Can you just discuss the man versus woman as related to earrings?
Don't make it sound bad with a man versus woman. I'll definitely start with the guidance. So as far as the guidance right now for the Army service uniform for the dimensions of the earring, it's still the same for the Army combat uniform. The only difference is female soldiers will not wear pearl earrings in the Army combat uniform. You can still wear pearl in the service and dress uniform, but not the Army combat uniform. And you will not wear earrings in a tactical training setting or a combat deployment. As far as the gender neutral, that's a negative at this point. Right now, it's strictly for female soldiers. Can't say what happened in the future, but for now, it's for female soldiers.
All right. Are we ready to move on to the next one?
If I may,
okay.
To kind of add some of the why behind. So as we discussed, there were several medical professionals brought in to brief the panel on different things, one being a dermatologist, the other one being a behavioral health specialist. And I will tell you, learned quite a bit from those individuals on how certain policies that we had in place impacted female soldiers. So as we are trying to get our arms around, the corrosives in the Army, things like suicide and SHARP, we learned some different things that may impact female soldiers in reference to being a female in a masculine Army. And, our attrition rates for females are higher than males. And as we started looking into those things, we realized that the need to feel as a female and be a soldier at the same time, earrings kind of help bridge the gap in soldiers who want to serve and be soldiers, but also want to feel like a female at the same time. So that was very educational to us and how some of that can impact individuals who may be feeling depressed because they don't feel like a female. That played a very large part in helping educate the panel when they made their decisions.
All right, we do have a lot of topics, so we'll keep the conversation moving as it pertains to women and women who are serving our country and the ways that we're becoming more inclusive. One of the things that came up was minimum hair length. We saw this as we opened up Ranger School to women and seeing, if they didn't make it through, well, they were leaving Ranger School and now they were out of regs. So let's do Sergeant Major Sanders. Sergeant Major Clark, back to you to discuss the minimum hair length for women.
Absolutely. I'll touch on this, and I'll also let Sergeant Major Sanders jump on this. So what we found as we implemented policies such as Soldier 2020, which is basically where we begin to bring females into combat arm MOSs, as female soldiers were going through certain training such as Ranger School and decided to shave their head, again, to be more inclusive with their peers that they were training with. Technically, they were out of regulation during that time frame in which they were doing it. And so we obviously saw that there was a contradiction between what we had in place and really where the Army is going. And there really was no rationale on setting a set minimum length for the female hair. So the the change in the regulation will now allow females to not have a minimum length requirement for their hairstyle.
Yeah, and before starting, I'll jump on. When you go through Ranger School, and I'm sure it may be a little different than when I went, 1990. But, that was one of the things, be no hair, be no chow, be no sleep. So I happened to be in Bravo company. And that was just one of their mottos. And imagine if you couldn't do that, you weren't like everybody else in the company. So it is really important to be inclusive, to be part of that team. And we shouldn't, punish anybody who says, hey, that's a standard, and why do we have that standard? That was the whole joys of looking into this, is that we had an opportunity to go, is that something we need to do, or why are we doing that?
And another thing too, if you look on the slide too, the female soldier down there with her children, she was actually one of the first women to graduate from within West Virginia Army National Guard, and she was one of the ones who brought this topic and something for us to explore. And at first we looked at it from the realm of special forces selection, Ranger School. Now that our female soldiers are breaking barriers, but we wanted to take it further. Should we just only be for school? It should be for a women's identity overall. It's a woman's choice to have hair or not, and that's something we really want to get after as well.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. So the next change that we're going to discuss is ponytails. I know there's been changes to the ponytail's hair length and it not having to be encapsulated for a certain length. Sergeant Major Sanders, can you expound on that?
For the short ponytail?
Yes.
Correct. So yeah, the short ponytail, this has been a one that's been up for debate. Like, how can you force something out of nothing? If you don't have the texture or length of hair to form a bun, what do you do? So we wanted to say, hey, you know what? It's okay to be able to wear a ponytail on the back of your head as long as it's not as wide as the back of your head, or it impairs the proper wear of your headgear. So this is one of those ones that the panel really looked at and said it just makes sense. Why not? I mean, as long as it's professional in appearance and it's neat and well groomed, why not? So here we are, being able to have an option. And from the medical perspective that the dermatologist really put, right now soldiers who are forcing hair to go into a bun is really pulling on the hair, causing hair loss, alopecia. And what we want to do, along with diversity and inclusion, but from the medical health and wellness aspect, is how do we make sure we keep our soldiers healthy? How do we go opposite of hair loss? So the best way to do that is to look at an option, and this is our option right here.
Now, SMA, we saw a lot on your social media, especially over the block leave. This topic is very emotionally charged for a lot of people. So what kind of went into, what were some of the things that you were hearing and your thoughts on this topic?
And this is really, how do you, I had actually a clap. You didn't see it out there, but there were people in here clapping for this. So, and what explained to me, how do I go from, if I want to go from medium to long hair, how do I do that? And then, why do I have to have my hair in a bun? So, and how do I do that? Sometimes the texture of my hair won't allow me to do that. So why wouldn't we have a policy that it is a little bit more inclusive based off the texture of my hair? And if I want to go, from a medium hairstyle to a long hairstyle, you have to have some kind of short ponytail, or you just had it, and once you cut it off, you can't ever, go from one hairstyle to the other. So I think this is really good for the Army.
All right, we said short ponytails. How about long ponytails? What did the panel come back with on long ponytails? First, what did the panel say originally, Sergeant Major Sanders? And then as we came back to that, we'll go SMA to discuss how that evolved.
Roger. So initially, the recommendation was to have long ponytails for female soldiers, not the guys, for female soldiers in all uniforms. And I was strictly a no, like, hey, keep it in the Army physical fitness uniform only. But after some talking, some more recommendations were brought up, and this is why there was a benefit of having a very diverse, panel from the combat arms perspective as well, and just soldiers in general. And they were able to look at, effectiveness and functionality along with the other, good, nice to haves. And what we looked at was, making this a yes, but under certain conditions. And some of those conditions are, conducting physical training in the Army combat uniform, utility uniforms, and also when, you're wearing certain kind of helmets like a CVC helmet or advanced combat helmet, to be able to have the option for taking your bun down in a ponytail and tucking that hair in the back of your neck down in your Army combat uniform coat, in order to be able to put that helmet on so it can sit without it impairing your vision or making it uncomfortable when you're trying to execute, effective training or combat operations.
And for me, I thought this is where it really, it's part about readiness. And everybody that's ever shot their rifle, especially, having something additional on the back of your head, push that helmet down over your eyes while shooting a rifle, is miserable. So, and it's, you know, it's males and females. And when somebody said, well, imagine, Sergeant Major, you got a bun on the back of your head, and that's actually, you got your, you know, your combat vest on, then you have a bun, and that's also pushing down. So to me, it may, you know, it would help our readiness to undo that. And then how would you wear your helmet if you're an aviator when that thing goes all the way over? If you had long hair, it's impossible. If you had it in a bun, it just doesn't work. So we just made our, you know, policy align with that. We're not going to have, everybody's going to have a long ponytail if you have long enough hair and you're going to put it in a bun. But if you're on the range or somewhere like that and you need to be more effective and more ready as a soldier, let's do it. So that's why we fully supported this one.
Right. And I want to stay with hair. So Sergeant Major Clark, let's discuss. One of the regulations was about different hairstyles and only being allowed to have one hairstyle on the head. Can you talk about the discussion that was had and the decision that we made on that topic?
Yes. So for under the previous guidance, you were only authorized to wear one hairstyle, but if we probably go back and look at some soldiers that we've all had at some point in time, we probably realize that they probably had multiple hairstyles at once, whether they had locks and then had it pulled into a bun or into a braid, or the case, and it still presented a professional look, and it didn't interrupt good order and discipline of the soldiers. So the panel took a look at this, and as you can see some of the imagery that is being broadcast, and as you look, these soldiers have multiple hairstyles, and it doesn't interfere with their ability to properly wear their headgear. They still have a professional appearance. There was no reason not to go with the recommendations of the panel to allow the multiple hairstyles in uniform.
Now, Sergeant Evans, if you could just kind of explain for the group just some of the different things, the options that women now have from your own experience dealing with this issue.
Sure. I mean, you can have braids and put it in a bun. You can do a braid to the side if you have shorter hair to the front or to the back. So you can wear multiple hairstyles at once, and it does make it easier when trying to adhere to the standard and being able to give you more options, especially if you have longer hair. It just gives you more options to adhere to the standard. So I think that was a win for us. So, Sergeant Major Clark, what can you tell us about the new changes to makeup and nails?
All right, so with fingernail polish, soldiers will be able to, female soldiers will be able to wear fingernail polish as long as the colors are not extreme or eccentric, and, you know, it presents a professional appearance. And, you know, I'll allow Sergeant Major Sanders to kind of add a little bit more to that.
Yes, so this was a good one, too, and this is one of those ones we made gender neutral in a sense. So we authorize male soldiers to wear clear nail polish. And just to kind of jump a little bit more on what Sergeant Major Clark said, you know, you just got to make sure when it comes to that professional and we say these extreme colors, you know, that's not, you know, your yellows, your blues, your purples, you know, those are definitely the unprofessional extreme colors that we don't want. And that's something, you know, as we come out with the ALARAC, we'll not necessarily tell you what color you can wear, but we'll put it in the frame of the category of acceptable colors that, you know, represent professionalism.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, next topic we want to get to is on highlights. Who wants to talk about highlights?
So I guess I'll take that one.
I would talk about it, but, you know, my highlights, this is it. I'm just happy I have hair.
Roger that. That's always a good thing. Always a good thing. So right now in the regulation, you know, hair dyes are already authorized, but we want to take this further. You know, hey, you know, female soldiers, even male soldiers, they want to, you know, have an opportunity to, you know, kind of jazz it up a little bit, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's part of your identity. And some people like myself, you know, you want to hide the grays. I don't hide them. I'll let you see them. But some, you know, want to, you know, maybe hide the gray, or some want to have the natural appearance. And, you know, that we really talked a little bit about what is a natural color. And that natural color is not your natural color. It's a natural color that can be worn, you know, for your highlights as a uniform blended color. So this was one we really looked at, you know, from the psychological realm of how do we increase productivity. And when you do that, it's really building upon the identity of the soldier. And that's something we really looked at in the recommendation of highlights.
You mentioned yourself, so are you implying that this highlight standard is gender neutral?
It is gender neutral.
So
Roger that.
men and women both are authorized a uniform blend of a natural color, not their natural color.
Roger. Correct.
You know what? When they brought this to me was for part of it was, you know, I had someone say, "Well, I've probably been wearing highlights. I just didn't know that was not allowed." Mm-hmm. So it's just, you know, part of this was what's actually already out there that maybe not everybody understood what the standards were in the beginning, and then that's why that whole panel and how we brought experts in and go, this is a highlight. And you know, I wasn't in the panel, I wasn't on the panel, but that's what they explained to me. It was like, here's what this is, and this is why the panel recommended that. And a lot of times, some of our soldiers were getting highlights and maybe didn't even know that that was part of the regulation, and the leaders didn't know. That's a different issue, but just kind of match what we're already doing for our soldiers and say, yeah, this is allowed.
All right, gentlemen, a lot of questions coming in. Again, if you have questions here in the room, you're welcome to stand up and come to the microphone. That signals to us that we have a question here in the room. But from Facebook, we've discussed a lot about women's hair and the different options that they have. How about men's hair, and specifically when we start looking at things like twists and locks and hard parts, afros, things like that? Were there any discussion on options that men have?
On the panel, there weren't any at this time. We just kind of stuck with the recommendations. The panel didn't delve off into that realm, but you know, they did, you know, want to ensure that the female soldiers that have a low cut can, you know, have it tapered and have the hard part. That current standard is in the regulation as it stands right now, of having a part where your hair would normally part, or if your hair doesn't part naturally, being able to put that hard part. Okay. But at this time, nothing, no conversation that was had during the panel.
Right, and so we know that words matter, right? And that's something that was addressed in the new standards. So, you know, women versus female, or offensive words like mohawk, Fu Manchu, dreadlock. What were some of the conversations, SMA, if you wouldn't mind discussing about some of those terms that maybe are antiquated or offensive in today's culture?
Back to, you know, really a larger thing, diversity, inclusion, and look at all our regs, and not just 670-1. Is our verbiage right? Are we being offensive and we don't even know that has a negative connotation over time? And there were some things, you know, why would we say mohawk? Why would we say Fu Manchu? Why would we say that? So just take that language out and say, is it in good order and discipline for our soldiers? And I think that's appropriate, and this is part of a bigger, where we look at those microaggressions, those things that we were saying that maybe we didn't know were offensive, that we need to be aware of that. So I think this is appropriate. Just stick to, these are the standards, this is what we're doing, and kind of get some of that language appropriate.
Roger. And on top of those words, you know, eccentric and faddish are normally used as weaponized wording. There was one comment that psychologists really brought up during the panel, that those words are often used for a certain demographic. And what we want to do is we want to utilize our lexicon and our vocabulary. There's many more words in a dictionary that we can use to describe and replace those words. So eccentric and faddish are definitely those two words we're going to try to get rid of, as well as, you know, clarify, you know, what do we mean by professional appearance? That is such a, you know, a subjective term. It's just kind of thrown out there, you know, professional appearance. Well, what is that? And that's what we want to define by, you know, a well, clean grooming appearance. And so that's what we're planning to get after, too, as we remove and replace the appropriate wording.
And Sir Major Sanders, the panel did decide on updating imagery for the AR and the DAPM. Could you tell us a little bit about that and how it's going to illustrate the new changes?
Roger. So as you all know, in the current regulation, that's just some outdated, I can't even think of the time frame of when that artwork was done. No knock to the artists who did the artwork at that time, but, you know, we're changing. It's not enough to equip leaders. It's not enough to equip us on what right looks like and what wrong looks like. And I think, you know, with the generation we are now, we want more information, and we deserve more information. So the intent behind updating the imagery, more examples, and we actually, you know, we're conducting round 2 of our photo shoot tomorrow to help get after, you know, giving more imagery, more examples. It really just bring it up to the times, and hopefully this is an evolving thing as revisions keep going. We can keep updating this thing to be more of a current reflection of what we're talking about in regard to guidance and Army policy.
Great.
Sergeant Major Clark, any other thoughts on the changes? What kind of sticks out to you? What do you see as maybe the biggest shift culturally for our Army?
So some additional changes that will come out and further guidance that will not be in 670-1, but again will be published in a separate ALARAC message, is diacritical name tags in the Army service uniform. This was a big change to allow for those who have hyphens in their names, who have an accent on their name. As you realize, some of those spellings or unique spellings of the names are part of your identity of who you are, your culture, where you come from. And so to allow those to be worn on the Army service uniform with your nameplate, I think is a big part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts with the soldiers.
All right. Once again, I'll remind you, we are trying to take as many questions as we can online. We're pulling those in right now. Again, if you have any questions here in the room, you're welcome to stand up. SMA, I guess I'll ask you the same question as what we've discussed today. What were some of the things that really stuck out to you?
Well, I think the biggest one for me is the earrings and the short ponytail and the long ponytail. It's just kind of, it's really progressive on how soldiers, can identify with, who they are. And I think that's what I really learned in this last year is, and I was at fault on this. I used to say, we're all soldiers, I just see green. What I learned, even throughout myself, is that when you say that, you don't see me as a soldier. So that's some of those things we're trying to understand is not only are you a soldier, but there's other pieces of you that are critical that we need to understand as an Army. And that's what's important about that's why I'm so excited about these grooming standards is that, some of this is, I need to do better as a person to see the people around me to identify that they may identify with something that I don't understand, but we're acknowledging that we're going to look at that. And that's why, some of those things that the three I just mentioned are really important to us.
Okay. We have another question in from the Facebook Live. Just a little bit of clarification on the ponytail. Is it just a free-flowing or is a braid going to be allowed? Sergeant Major Sanders, do you want to?
For the long ponytail, correct. Roger. For the braided ponytail, if they have to tuck it.
Mm-hmm. So Roger. A long single braid will be authorized when they are wearing the long ponytail?
Correct.
Okay. Good deal. Next question. It looks like a lot of these recommendations are significantly geared toward women and specifically women of color. Were there any male standards? And I kind of think I know what you're getting at on this one, but it does seem like a lot of these new changes are geared toward primarily women of color. Can we just elaborate and explain kind of why this panel specifically focused on those issues? Sergeant Major Clark.
So I'll start on a piece of this. So again, as the SMA kind of laid out earlier, these were the topics that were presented to us. There is a process that we have where if you have concerns or issues, you can send them to the Uniform Policy Office for consideration to be looked at. So as we looked at these specific ones, specifically the short ponytails, part of the issues as the dermatologist briefed to the panel was it created alopecia, and 1/3 of African-American females were impacted by that alopecia, but it also impacted Asian soldiers, Latino soldiers, other demographics as well. So it wasn't geared toward just only African-American women, it was geared toward just women in general. They broke down the hairstyles in a high, medium, and low risk to the soldier that basically gave them alopecia. And what we found was for soldiers who were transitioning, as we mentioned earlier, from a short hairstyle to a long hairstyle, trying to force their short hair into a bun, it put them in the high risk. And so that was one of the reasons why we made that change. It wasn't necessary, it just happened to impact 1/3 of African Americans and of course other minority demographics. So it just kind of happened to work out that way based on what the problem set that was presented to the panel. But it wasn't intentionally designed to go look just for specific demographics to try to improve with.
All right, SMA, you know what's coming. You know it was inevitable. Every man in the Army wants to know, are we getting the beard?
No. Okay. No, we're not. That's not one of those things we looked at. And I am a man in the Army, so I may disagree that every man in the Army wants a beard. So, no, we're not looking at it. But there's already an exception to policy for those that have issues with shaving. There's already a profile that you can get, and you can have a beard. There's also religious accommodations, and I'll let Sergeant Major Clark or Sergeant Major Sanders jump in if I miss anything. But there is way, but we had not reviewed it, and it was not on the docket. So right now, you will not have a beard.
Yeah, I think that this is a perfect example of what you talk about when we say you can have policy, but it needs leadership. The policy does have authorizations for beards, and yet still we hear stories all the time of soldiers who feel like they still have to shave and they're forced into shaving, even though they have those medical or religious exemptions.
Yeah, and the other side of this, for the leaders, if your soldiers have a valid exception to policy, that's a valid exception to policy. We have to be acceptance. Again, just because it doesn't look like you or act like you doesn't mean it's right or wrong. That's the whole point of being inclusive. So if there is an exception to policy to have a beard, there should be no leader out there telling a soldier to shave. We have to do better than that.
I'm getting a note that it looks like about a third of our Facebook Live audience dropped off. They said, we're done. We're done.
Yes, and where the famous quote was, if I can't have a beard, I'm just going to get out of the Army. So I don't know. I guess we have a great transition program.
Please contact your Soldier for Life representative.
And I ask everybody to use it. I still think we have the greatest Army in the world, and we have some great policies. And we're constantly looking at how we can get better. Yeah.
So why now? Why is this in 2021? We've had gender integrated units for years. We've had desegregated units for decades. Why are we just now looking at some of these policies that are affecting and becoming more inclusive?
So I will tell you, it may appear like just now, but the truth is we've been looking at these for quite some time. Some of you may or may not be aware of the Army People Strategy, which is approaching its one-year anniversary, which gets after how we acquire, develop, employ, and retain, our soldiers. And in those 4 lines of effort, we mesh in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we've been going through all of the regulations to figure out, how can we improve the standards and policies that we have to make sure that they are fair and equitable for all soldiers, and so that we can obviously get the best talent in the Army. So if you just take a look at other things, like things that we just recently did with temporary promotions, that gets after, disadvantaged individuals. And there's more coming. So this is just, we're just getting started with all of the different changes to make the Army better for you. The chief, the SMA, the secretary are all, very adamant about people first. And we are trying to show you the action that is being put behind that mantra of putting you as a soldier first through policy.
Yeah, and just a caveat, and I've been in the Army, I think sometimes longer than dirt, but our Army has changed, and it's going to continuously change. I was on the hair panel when I was a division sergeant major. I sat through the full 3 days and had all the experts come in and explain to me about hair. So we did that in 2015. We didn't have the pony. If you went 10 years ago, there was no ponytails in physical fitness or anywhere. And we made that change, and now we've got another change. So change is just how the Army runs, and I know some people don't really like that because change is hard, and it just, you get set to what we used to do. That may not be what we're going to use in the future. So these changes, I'd say, are just part of the normal progression of the military and how we're trying to be more inclusive. And why not? People say, well, why now? And I'd say, well, why not? So when you see something that you would ask that we need to change, bring it up through the appropriate channels, or just send it to Sergeant Major Clark. Use his email right there. But send it to us, and we'll take a look at it. I really trust that our leaders now, we don't look at everything, but we do over time. We look at it, and we're going to review it again. It's going to change 3 years from now or 2 years from now. There's going to be something else. We'll go, oh, we didn't get that right. It's coming. I'm going to tell you right now, this isn't the end, like Sergeant Major Clark said. So the change is here. We had enough people bringing that forward. We looked at it. We're going to make those changes, but there'll be more changes in the future.
Okay, from Facebook, Ali Prescott asks, was there any discussion on 600-9 revisions as part of inclusivity or just any discussion within this panel and maybe any other discussion happening?
No. So this was a grooming standards panel.
Right.
So there was no discussions about 600-9. The only study that we currently have on it's called the Female Elite Warrior, and they're doing that up at Natick, and they have all the equipment to do the test to say and they brought in some of those females that went through Ranger School, the one female that graduated through Special Forces, and look at their body style and do we have that correctly. I've already asked TRADOC to go out and see when exactly the last time we studied this, and is it time to do another study? I've had enough people ask me, and every time I meet, even if it is a grooming standards forum, to ask me about it, that I've asked TRADOC to go back and do a review and say, when was the last time we actually reviewed the standards? Do we have that correct? So I've got that out. It'll take us some time to review that, but I've asked TRADOC to help me out with that.
All right, trying to sift through all the facial hair questions. I think we have really hit that one home. Someone is taking the opportunity here. This is Chief Huddleston from the 82nd. He's watching with his squad. They wanted to take this opportunity and ask if there were any updates coming to the ACFT. I know it's not the main topic of this, but something that's very on a lot of people's minds. So while we have the opportunity, SMA, would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. The Army Combat Fitness Test. We have one change that we haven't rolled out yet. We're just going to make sure that the senior leaders have looked at that. We're calling it 3.0, 3.0, and I'm not going to talk about the specifics of that until we make sure that we are moving in the right direction. So there is version 3 that we're coming out with, and I'm really excited about that proposal. And most people would go back and look at the National Defense Authorization Act and say, how has that affected the current ACFT? And where it says, hey, we have to do an independent review. We've already started the independent review, or we got the idea it's coming. I believe they're going to meet in March. Then we'll get an update in the beginning of the summer, and then the end of the summer. And then the final review is going to be in December. So right now, with the changes of Army Combat Fitness Test 3.0 and the independent review, we still believe we're on track for the ACFT in March of 22. So we still have some time to go. I'd still say fitness counts, and I'd ask you all to stay on track. It's a good test. We're going to continue to work real hard to get this right.
And take it. Take the test.
Yes, please. Keep up with your physical fitness, and when in doubt, take the Army Combat Fitness Test. And over time, I think you'll do better. It's really good for your total fitness.
So the next question is for Sergeant Major Clark and Sergeant Major Sanders. How can soldiers make a recommendation or recommended changes to AR 670-1, and how will those changes be taken into consideration, like future changes?
Yes, so there's multiple ways. DA Form 2028 is the actual official form to submit to my office directly, to myself and Master Sergeant Quintana Mitchell. We'll definitely take those into consideration. I would ask that you make sure this is vetted through your command team and it is endorsed by the commander before it's sent up, because it could be something as simple as a grammatical change or something not worded right inside policy or regulation. But there are bigger items that affect the whole Army, and for something of that magnitude, it has to go up, through the G1 Sergeant Major to the Sergeant Major of the Army, his senior enlisted council, and to Army senior leaders for us to really look at things and see how does this positively affect our Army. And that's really just to sum up, how something could be as minor as something that's just as major as something that affects the Army, how it would go. But if you have any questions, I'm easy to find, brian.c.sanders on Global. Just shoot me an email and we'll answer it for you.
That was brave.
They blew up. Hey, they're going to email me anyway.
I'd also say, I'm not sure, you have to completely vet a recommendation throughout your chain of command. If you've got something, send it to him, and then the Senior Enlisted Council meets every quarter. Every quarter we get together and we come in with recommendations, whether that's 670-1, grooming standards. There's a whole bunch of things we get together, and we have experts come brief the Senior Enlisted Council. And at that point, if the council believes that's actually how you got the panel. So these recommendations were brought to the Senior Enlisted Council. We looked at them and said, okay, if this is really important, what we really didn't want to do is have, us, again, because we were more seasoned people in that room, we wanted to get the panel. So the Senior Enlisted Council got briefed on these recommendations, and then we asked for a panel. So anytime you could talk to your senior sergeant majors in your installations across the globe, or you could send it straight to him, and Sergeant Major Sanders has an obligation to bring it to us. We look at it and say, do we need to look at it? And then we'll send those things out for those grooming, and that's how you actually got to these recommendations.
Given a number of these recommendations or these new standards are gender specific, we had a question about the ending of the transgender ban and allowing transgendered people to come and serve as long as they meet the Army standard. I think the answer should be pretty obvious, but can we just state out there just how these gender-specific standards will impact transgendered soldiers?
So I would tell you, I think they're referencing the guidance that was put out by the Secretary of Defense yesterday. So what we as the Army are doing now are taking a look at our policy, providing recommendations to the Army senior leaders so that we can get a decision on how we are going to support the Secretary of Defense's guidance on supporting transgender. So there's more to come and more conversations to be held. And then once those decisions are made, we're definitely going to notify the field or how we're going to do our part.
Yeah, and I think, just to be clear, it started with the president when he said, we signed the executive order and then the SecDef. But it does take us some time to review the policy. I mean, we had a policy in 2016 that changed. There was another executive order that was signed by the president at the time, and then we made a change. And so this is again, remember I talked about that change. Change is just how, it's been every time I've been in the Army for a long time. It just, things change. So we're going to look at that. We'll have to adjust or not and see, here's the standard. Did we get that right? And then what that means. So we got a little bit of work to do. The good news is we've changed several times on this, and we had a policy. Did we look at it? We're going to go back and review it, and then publish another policy to make sure it aligns with what we're doing today.
And to be clear, the gender-specific standards that a soldier will follow will be tied to the gender marker inside the DEERS program.
I'm just going to say right now, yes, but let's make sure we go back and review the policy that we have. Do we have it right? Mm-hmm. Is that right? And that was, if you were in DEERS and that was your gender marker, or if you changed at that point, then you would, that was what we were doing. That's still there. But again, we're going to, like any change, we're going to review it and say, did we have that right? So whatever policy we have, that is still in effect. But that doesn't mean we're not going to look at it. We just got, new guidance from the Secretary of Defense and the President, and it's time to go back and review it and say, okay, to the force one more time, because each year people get out of the Army, it's about 60,000 at the active component, about 130,000 every year leave active guard and reserve every year. So again, we got the guidance. Let's review what the policy is, and then we'll come back out and say, let's review it. Do we have that correct? Re-educate the force, because that's part of that. It's just like this with the grooming standards. It's about getting this message out to the force. Then we say, here's what we're going to do, and then here's the date that you can enforce the standard and move to this, instead of here's what we think and we believe. We've got the guidance. And I think I would just ask for a little bit of time for us to review that and put that out one more time.
Great. We'll do one last question, and it's a leadership question. So this is from Samantha Webb on Facebook, who wants to ask about the phrase commander's discretion. And really this is kind of a leadership point at, how do we, what guidance do we have for our leaders when we're saying exercise discretion to make sure that they are getting it right more often than not?
Well, I think, specifically for the grooming standards, that's, I think, what Sergeant Major Clark was trying to say. Those graphics in, 670-1, it's like, maybe I was drawing those. I don't know. I'm not very good. Now, my daughter, she's really good, so she would have done much better than I am. But we need to update that. That helps us with clarity. That does help us with clarity. But anytime that you feel that maybe we don't have it right in the commander's discretion, there are other levels. That's what's great about the Army. There's other levels. Can say, hey, maybe I disagree, and with the way I read this, and what's great about my Army, we're allowed to do that and say, hey, can we look at this? And then you either submit the form or you notify us. Maybe we don't have that right. But I think it's really important on some of the graphics that Sergeant Major Clark was talking about is to get that out. So we can do better with technology that we have today to help us inform, so there's not as much commander's discretion. When you have a very bland piece of paper and it's blank, it's hard, because that's where you get, well, I believe it says this. If we can get a better graphic, and it'll help us depict that. I believe that's where we're going.
And if you think about it, every policy doesn't fit every situation in the Army perfectly. Otherwise, we wouldn't have exceptions to that policy. And so there are instances where a command, a unit can be in a unique environment where there's a gray area that may come to what the regulation says. And so the commander's discretion allows them to be able to make a decision, obviously probably consulting legal and things of that nature, that is best for that organization and those soldiers in that situation.
Great. Thank you so much. And I want to thank everyone who asked a question. Would like to thank those of you here in the audience who joined us. The slides that you saw today, we're going to make sure that we're posting those. A lot of new, material will be coming out through social media channels, down through the command channels, and if I'm not mistaken, these will be, the AR-670-1 will be out for the field to review. 1600 today is what we're looking at on Army Publishing Directorate. And again, keep in mind that these changes don't come into effect until after that grace period is come down. So keep an eye out across all the Army social media channels to find more information, more graphics, more messages, just things to help you as soldiers to know the standard and leaders to set and enforce the standards. So Sergeant Major of the Army, Grinston, would you like to kind of close us out with any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I would just like to say thanks to the Public Affairs folks and those that put this together. This is really important for Army. It's important for us to message this. So for those in the audience and those in the online audience, make sure you get this out and say, and voice your opinion and say, hey, what are the things you need to see? And then let us know. It may not come tomorrow, but we will do our best to look at those things that we need to do. And I'm really proud of the team for putting this together. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank Sergeant First Class Evans for co-moderating.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank everyone for watching. That concludes our event today. We look forward to the comments that are going to come after this. The pitchforks and the torches that are coming to the Pentagon right now. No, we'll get through this, and so we really appreciate everyone joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.